Chapter 16 Operation Stormbreaker. Earlier, I said that many history books erroneously claim the siege of Hiroshima went from the beginning of December until just before Christmas. In reality, the siege proper occurred during the late summer months and the whole of autumn. What happened between December 1st and December 21st cannot be described as any kind of battle, like the fights at Sapporo, Obama, or Okinawa. It was not a military operation in any sense of the word. The final battle of the Third World War was nothing more than a genuine bloodbath. Outraged by the nuclear holocaust inflicted on their navy, the Soviet Red Army launched a ground invasion of Hiroshima itself. Capturing strategic objectives, ending the war, forcing a surrender, such lofty goals were done away with. The enemy had only one intention: to avenge their great loss by sacking Hiroshima, much the same way the Soviets had sacked Berlin 70 years before. Almost 90,000 enemy soldiers, supported by thousands of armored vehicles, artillery, and aircraft, poured into the city from the north, east, and west. Naval ships in the Seto Sea turned their weapons against Hiroshima. The deep thunder of big guns heralded terrible explosions that flattened whole buildings, killing dozens at a time. From above, we heard the roar of jet engines as Japanese and American fighters, deployed from all over East Asia, struggled to keep Soviet bombers away from the city. Tens of thousands of civilians fled before the advancing battle line, and with each day, free Hiroshima got a little smaller. The 10 remaining howitzers of the 13th Artillery, set up in their new home in Central Park, started firing into the enemy with vicious abandon. It took whole convoys of ammo trucks to keep the guns firing around the clock, and spent shells were piling up in the river, creating an impromptu dam on one side. Captain Holly Smith set up her command post in Hiroshima Castle, a short distance away, on the other side of a small moat. The castle's main tower granted us an excellent view of the surrounding area. Aaron and Kotori occupied the top floor with binoculars, spotting potential targets of interest for us. Sometime after the fighting started in earnest, they spotted a very interesting development coming our way. December 5th, 2012, Hiroshima Castle, Naka Ward. "Everyone tuck your shirts in," Aaron's voice cried out from the top of the castle tower one morning. "We've got big brass on the way." Chihiro Tachibana and I didn't hear Aaron's warning. At the moment, the two of us were crewing one of the howitzers. I was turned to one side so that one ear was facing away from the gun. Sticking a finger in one ear and holding a radio receiver up to the other, I heard the voice of a British squad leader say, "Good effect on target. Repeat. Over." I shouted to Chihiro, "Fire!" She pulled the cord and the cannon went off with a blast that shook the earth. About 28 kilometers away, Soviet soldiers scattered as another explosion rocked their formation. Meanwhile, behind us, a convoy of armored vehicles pulled into Central Park. A 2-ton truck covered in armored plating came to a stop. An orange flag with 5 white stars was draped over the hood. The Supreme Allied Commander dismounted and looked around our little operation. General Laura Harper is probably the most illustrious soldier the United States of America has ever produced. She's even overshadowed myself, and I fought at Jericho's side for over a year. At just over 50 years old, General Harper was a powerful woman who commanded a strong presence. And this was long before she was commander of XCOM, or Secretary General of the United Nations of Earth. Captain Smith descended from the tower and came to greet her personally. A few minutes later, a pair of hands clapped Chihiro and I on the back. "We're relieving you," said a British gunner. "The big brass wants to see you inside." The rest of our squad was already inside the castle tower when we arrived. The sound of guns firing was deadened in here, so we could hear one another talk. We found Kotori struggling to get Aaron to pay attention. Before the war, Hiroshima Castle was converted into a history museum, and now Aaron was frequently breaking from the group to check out what few exhibits remained. Meanwhile, General Harper paused to allow Chihiro and I to join the meeting. We sat down on what had once been a display case for Sengoku-era clothing. The general was not alone here. 2 aides were nearby, taking notes on a sheet of paper. Harbor was debriefing everyone who'd participated in the Miyoshi jailbreak last week. "So the enemy knew Princess Asami was with you," Harper said. "Yamamoto and Takahashi blew her cover." "Yes, ma'am, that's right," Holly said, although she calls herself Chihiro Tachibana now, on account of the imperial family wanting nothing to do with her anymore. Next to me, Chihiro winced. The general hand-waved Holly's comment and pressed on. "The important thing is this," Harper said. "Those 2 traitors have not only given away crucial intel about our weapons and capabilities. We've got reports from the field saying they've been put in command of some unit and are joining the assault. They're guiding the enemy into the city." "Those cretins!" Kotori cursed. General Harper crossed over to one of the big exhibit cabinets in the middle of the room and swept several artifacts onto the floor, making a space for a big map of Hiroshima. Aaron reflexively jumped forward to try and save a few pieces from being smashed, giving Harper a mean look. Ignoring him, the general used a pencil to draw an X on the map, showing our own location in Central Park. "What's the minimum range of your howitzers?" she asked. "How close does the enemy need to get before you're useless?" Say about 15 kilometers, I replied with a shrug. "Any closer and our barrels will be parallel to the street." Harper was thinking so hard I could see her biting her tongue. Then she looked around the room and said, "Captain Smith, are any of your superiors alive?" "No, ma'am," Holly replied. "At this point, I'm speaking for the 13th Artillery Company." "And you trust these soldiers, Smith?" "I do. All of the boys I don't trust are with the enemy now." The general addressed us all. "Soldiers, I'll be honest with you. Our backs are against the wall. Our enemy is numerically superior and very bloodthirsty after what our outgoing president did." As she looked around the room, General Harper saw me and we locked eyes. In that moment, I knew she'd figured out who I was, and I think she altered her speech a little because of that. "The enemy has been hitting us on all sides, and they're drawing blood each time. I've been going from one unit to the next, asking whatever commanders are still alive for tactical and strategic advice. We need every edge we can get, so hit me with whatever ideas you have." "What about minefields?" Aaron suggested. "Force them to move into bottlenecks." "The natural terrain does that already," Tsubaki pointed out. "The whole city is like a bunch of islands already, because the river branches a lot. Haven't you seen all the bridges?" "So let's blow them up," I offered. "Minami Ward is the biggest island, right? Move everyone over here, blast the bridges, then hold out until somebody can send help. Maybe from Okinawa or Korea." Harper shook her head. "That's a double-edged sword. Restricting our own movement could have serious consequences down the road." While we started bickering and talking over ways to defend the city, Kotori stepped past the general and looked down at the map, tracing some imaginary line with her fingertip. "Who are you?" Harper asked. "Sato," Kotori replied. "Where did you say the Russians were?" Looking a little perplexed, General Harper ran her pencil tip around the map, drawing a line that started at Hatsukashi, ran northeast to the University of Economics, shot east down to the Nakakura Shrine, then ran southwest before terminating at the Kaito Bridge. The conversation ground to a halt as everyone looked at Kotori. She withdrew an ink pen from her pocket and started to draw X marks over certain bridges and causeways, but by no means did she mark all of them. Then she drew circles around a few more bridges. In the end, Kotori had marked slightly less than half of all bridges in Hiroshima. "Demolish these river crossings," Kotori said, pointing to the X marks. Pointing to the circles, she added, "and put landmines on the others. Also—" Then she drew a second line on the map, this one inside of Harper's line and closer to the center of Hiroshima. If I were to put my finger on the map, there would have been about half an inch of clearance between the two lines. Kotori created a zone in which a significant portion of the city was between the two marks. Then she looked up at Harper. You need to flatten every building between those two lines. Crikey! Soylent gasped. Sato, you sick little ripper! General Harper was speechless. I tried to be the voice of reason. Hey, you're talking about blowing up thousands of civilian buildings. We're not trying to create a wasteland out here. We don't have a choice, Kotori countered. We can't force the enemy into a bottleneck without cutting ourselves off from escape or rescue. We can still force them to fight on ground we picked. Flatten everything in this strip, then fall back and take cover in the buildings that are still standing. We'll have cover and protection. They'll be forced to attack over open ground. It'll be like we were hiding behind a stone wall. Wait a minute, Harper said. What about the people who live or work in those buildings? When this fight is over, they'll have nothing to go back to. Kotori balled up her hands into fists. She looked like she was losing her patience. But at that moment, Chihiro Tachibana stepped in. General Harper, she said, there are over 1 million people living in Hiroshima. If we can't save their lives, then what's the point of saving their homes? If you really have to choose between one or the other... Chihiro trailed off, and the general nodded with a sigh. Harper folded her arms. She was giving Kotori's idea some very serious consideration. Finally, she said, Those two traitors, how well did they know you, Sato? We'd been working together for some time, Kotori admitted. We met about 6 months before the Americans started joining our squad. Right, Harper said. So they might have some trouble guessing your next move. Don't go anywhere, Sato, and don't get killed. You'll be hearing from me before tomorrow. Harper left our camp just after midday, and we heard from her again when the sun went down. As it was getting dark, she sent a motorcycle with a sidecar to Central Park, and Kotori was spirited away by the driver. We didn't see our friend until the following morning. Kotori looked very tired and worn out, but happy. She relayed to us the news. There was a plan in place to save Hiroshima. She refused to say how big of a part she played in its creation, and I think Kotori's humbleness is partly to blame for the fact that her role in this part of the story is mostly forgotten. But this is the clear, unvarnished truth. Even though Laura Harper was the woman in charge of the defense of Hiroshima, Kotori Sato was its grand architect. Kotori's plan to defend Hiroshima was called Operation Storm Breaker, and it went like this. First, all soldiers and civilians would retreat to Minami and Naka wards, the centermost part of Hiroshima, built entirely on islands in the Oda River Delta. Our defense would be built around the many bridges that connected metropolitan Hiroshima to the rest of the city on the mainland. Of the 42 bridges that cross the Oda and Enko rivers, 20 would be destroyed with dynamite. Most of the remainder would be booby-trapped with anti-tank landmines, and 2 left clear should we need to escape. Our side's endgame would be to hold out and wait for rescue. Ever since the battle at Tsushima, American, Japanese, and Korean naval ships started plowing through the Seto Inland Sea, smashing and blasting their way towards the now trapped Soviet flotilla. We just needed to hold the line until friendly warships pulled up in the port, which contained not only docking places for big ships, but multiple landing pads for helicopters. We needed to keep the enemy as far away from the water as possible, even if that meant giving up Hiroshima International Airport. Of course, we didn't just let the Russians have the place. Our side planted some 4,000 landmines on the grounds of the facility, tore the runway to unusable shreds, and used plastic explosives to demolish the radar tower. We did have one major advantage going into this fight. Even though Hiroshima was surrounded, everyone knew the enemy had finally overextended himself. The Spetsnaz paratroopers we fought earlier had, by this point, gone for several weeks without resupply. They were low on both food and ammo. The defenders of Hiroshima were, by contrast, relatively well supplied, and we had friendly forces close by. The American troops were coming from the Pacific, rerouted from their mission to relieve Tokyo. Japanese soldiers and tanks were massing in Yamaguchi, where a train was waiting to move whole armies directly into Hiroshima. On the night of December 8th, The central core of Kotori's plan was put into motion, the creation of a 200-foot-wide kill zone. The enemy only found out something was going on when the entire city went dark. As a safety precaution, General Harper had ordered Hiroshima's power supply to be cut. Then the explosions started. Army engineers spent 2 nights and a day blowing up thousands of buildings all over Hiroshima. All the while, tens of thousands of people fled into Minami and Naka, keeping just ahead of the Soviet advance. Women and children carried their belongings over their heads, stepping lightly over the wreckage and ruins strewn about the streets. By the dawn of the 3rd day, we could see the result of Kotori's clever plan. December 12th, 2012. Hiroshima Castle, Naka Ward. Up on the top floor of the castle, Holly Smith passed off a couple pairs of binoculars to Kotori, Aaron, Chihiro, and I as we arrived to overlook the drastic change in the cityscape. A strip of devastation now ran around the perimeter of urban Hiroshima, demarcating a gruesome border between occupied Japan and free ground. Even Kotori let out a low whistle at her handiwork. "What do you Westerners call this again?" she asked. "No man's land," Aaron replied. "It doesn't matter what side you're on. Being caught in the middle of that zone is a death sentence now." The sounds of gunfire caught our attention. I put a pair of binoculars to my face and scanned the cityscape. Looking west, I saw that there was some kind of a fight happening near Hiroshima's biggest train station. It was just across the river from Minami Ward, where a very large and very wide bridge was still intact. "Hey, Kotori," I said. "That bridge on the Enko River, the one with 10 traffic lanes. Were our guys supposed to demo it?" "Yeah," Kotori said, snatching the binoculars from me. "That one should have been blown up." She looked down towards the Enko River, then said something in Japanese that was almost certainly a very vile obscenity. "It's still standing!" Kotori swore. "Why is that goddamn bridge still standing? They should have set off the charges already." Chihiro, Aaron, and I all raised our rifles and used the scopes to look down into the trouble spot. There seemed to be a firefight going on near the Enko River. I could see the telltale puffs of smoke and muzzle flashes that gave it away. "I see tracer rounds coming from the south," Aaron reported. "The Russians must have gotten held up trying to cross." "Dead bodies in the river," I added. "Looks like they're Russians." "There's a vehicle coming from around the corner of the train station," Chihiro said. "Armored with 8 wheels." "That's a BTR," I said, swinging my rifle around to look at it through the scope. "They're used for reconnaissance a lot, so whoever's hitting the bridge might not be a big force." "Recon," Kotori repeated. Then she started scanning the fight down below. I don't know what she was looking for, but lucky for us, she found it soon enough. "There he is!" Kotori shouted. "Who?" Chihiro, Aaron, and I said. "Yamamoto!" Kotori said. "That sneaky, cunning little—" She grabbed for the high-frequency radio kit used to communicate with the rest of the 13th Artillery, but Captain Smith beat her to it. Our leader picked up the radio, her face full of rage. "I'll kill that traitorous little weasel myself," Holly snarled. "Blue Yankee 5, this is Stormbreaker 1 Actual. I need you to send a fire mission. Coordinates to follow." "Stormbreaker 1 Actual," replied an American voice. "Our mortar teams are ready to engage. Send your targets." "Since when were we called Stormbreaker?" I whispered to the others. "Smith liked the name I made up," Kotori replied. "Blue Yankee 5, I need you to hit the following location." Holly looked out at the enemy, then down at a map of Hiroshima. "Your target is 34 degrees, 23 minutes, 48 seconds north by 227 degrees, 31 minutes, 41 seconds west." "Copy all," replied the mortar team leader. "Get ready for some thunder." The sounds of the mortars being fired was like distant fireworks, and a moment later a series of explosions tore through the bridge. Concrete and water sailed high into the air, while enemy soldiers scattered like leaves in the wind. In the middle of the chaos, I tried to spot Yutaka Yamamoto to see if he'd been hit or killed. After the war, Yutaka told me that he survived by crawling underneath the BMP and hiding there for the entirety of the mortar strike. "Did we get him?" Kotori cried out. "Did we get the bastard?" "Forget that," I yelled. "Everyone take cover!" I was looking at the BMP. As soon as the first mortar round hit the pavement, the main gun turret on the enemy vehicle started to swivel, turning to face the main tower of Hiroshima Castle. The gun rose until its barrel was aimed towards a point roughly halfway up the tower. "Aw, shit!" Aaron shouted. "Incoming!" The BMP's cannon roared to life, sending round after round into the castle walls. We all ducked down, hands over our heads, as the building shook violently from the impact. I felt my boots slide along the wooden floor. The tower was swaying dangerously. "Everyone out!" Holly shouted. "Get to the ground level! The bloody tower's coming down!" We scrambled 2 by 2 down the stairs. At one point, the stairwell was shattered into splinters, and a gaping hole opened up in the wall like a wound. Everybody jumped down the last few wrecked stairs and finally escaped into the castle courtyard. We turned around just in time to see another salvo from the BMP's cannon tear through the tower, and with a defeated creaking and groaning of timbers and concrete, the main tower of Hiroshima Castle collapsed, its wreckage crashing into the moat with a terrible noise. "Are you kidding me?" Aaron threw down his rifle and shouted. "That's an important historical site. You can't just blow up stuff like that." "The Russians sure think they can," I said, looking around. "Hey, are we missing a few people?" All around the courtyard, the other soldiers were trying to pick up the pieces following the attack. Quite literally. One of our 10 howitzers was partially buried underneath some rubble. Soylent and Tsubaki joined the team in trying to dig it out. Chihiro Tachibana did a head count. "Yeah, where's that girl? What's her name? Hanako." "Her name is Nanako," I corrected her. The answer to our question came in the form of an explosive cracking noise. A hand grenade detonated on the far side of the moat, about 300 yards away from us. We all whipped around to look. Nanako Yamada, remember, this is Akira Robinson, was standing on the battlements of the castle walls, aiming and shooting her rifle at something on the far shores of the moat. "Contact front!" Nanako yelled. "Russian scouts on the main road!" Chihiro, Aaron, Holly, Kotori, and I all ran to the wall. We not only found Nanako up there, but Hal McIntosh as well, who was leaning against the concrete barrier, laughing his head off. "You should have seen it," Hal roared. "One of those Ruskies blew himself sky high." We all poked our heads over the chest-high cobblestone wall to look. On the eastern side of Hiroshima Castle, there was a simple bridge that connects the stronghold to the rest of the city. The far end of the bridge intersects with a major roadway, with a great white torii gate marking the spot where it begins. One of the 2 posts of the torii was pockmarked with shrapnel and splattered with blood. A pair of Russian scouts were taking cover behind the wreck of a semi-truck, unable to take their eyes off an ominous crater in front of the torii. "I was just about to start blasting those scouts," Hal explained, "but before I could get a shot off, one of them just exploded. It's like one of his grenades went off in his pocket or something," Hal explained. Nanako took careful aim and sent a volley of bullets toward the 2 remaining scouts. "It's a good bet the Russians know we're here," Nanako called to us. "They're going to make another run at our cannons." Holly nodded grimly. "We need to start retreating to a new position before the whole Red Army comes down on us," she said. "Ray, Robinson, Tachibana, and Sato, tell the howitzer crews to pack and get ready to move out." "And go where?" Chihiro said. "Captain, we're in the middle of a giant city. There's not a lot of places to set up artillery pieces." "And it won't take the enemy long to figure out we're gone," I added. "Captain, some of us should rearguard again, like we did back in Asakita. Keep the Russians' focus away from the guns." "Agreed," Holly said. She pulled a map of Hiroshima out of her pocket. "We've got 10 guns," she said. "Let's split them up, 2 groups of 5. One team can set up in the parking lot of this supermarket on Ujinadori Avenue. The other group can go here, to the park across the street from Hiroshima Prison." She pointed to a spot roughly 1 mile south of the Peace Park, then looked up at me. "Robinson, Sato, gather up a squad and chase the Russians back to no man's land. Buy us as much time for us to get these cannons out of here as you can." December 13th, 2012. Before she passed away, Yukiko Takahashi did share her side of the following events with me, so it seems only fair that I include her tale in this chapter. Early in the morning of the 13th, Yukiko, dressed in her new Soviet Army uniform, reported to a prefab shelter located on the other side of the Enko River, just beyond Hiroshimeki, a major train station. This was the temporary headquarters of the 98th Guards Airborne, the Soviet Army division spearheading the attack on Hiroshima. Yutaka Yamamoto was already there, alongside two men whose military uniforms were decorated with crimson ribbons and epaulets. The political officers of the Communist Party were speaking to Yamamoto in a very terse kind of way, causing Yukiko to slow down her own approach. "General Sidrov knew you were taking a risk," one of the political officers said. "Your intel was good up to a certain point. You neglected to warn us about the possibility of an enemy counterattack." "That wasn't my fault," Yutaka responded. "I told you in advance the girl was a princess. You should have anticipated a rescue attempt and planned for it." The political officer shook his head and pressed on. "Furthermore, our attack certainly did not incapacitate the princess's company as you claimed it would. While she has not been spotted yet, our snipers have observed her dark-skinned American consort, the same man who led the team that broke into our fob and took the princess from us. He and the rest of his company are occupying Hiroshima Castle just upriver from us. Clearly, you failed to deliver on what you promised us, Yamamoto. That girl was going to be the first ruler of the People's Republic, and now she's gone thanks to your negligence. When this war is over, you'll be lucky to live in a farmstead in Hokkaido. Don't you dare dream of finding a home in the Russian motherland, unless you've got Siberia in mind." The political officers left Yutaka alone, who was seething. Yukiko tried to put one hand on his shoulder to console him, but he brushed her off, saying, "I'm going to kill that girl, and that American too." "If it helps," Yukiko said softly, "I know where they are." December 14th, 2012. By now, the howitzers of the 13th Artillery Company were long gone, but our little squad wasn't giving the enemy the opportunity to learn this. We'd taken up defensive positions along Kotori's stone wall, the imposing line of concrete buildings on the Japanese side of no man's land, the same line of devastation carved through the city on Kotori's suggestion. On our left and right sides, we could hear gunfire and explosions. The Russians were attacking up and down the line, and soon it would be our turn. Holed up inside of what had once been the Fuji Hakushima supermarket, Chihiro, Tsubaki, Holly, Aaron, Kotori, and I had a clear line of fire north. Any Russians coming our way would have to cross both no man's land and a parking lot just to reach us. It was a killing field. Up on the roof, Soylent Green, Hal McIntosh, and Nanako Yamada were armed with high-powered sniper rifles, overwatching the whole combat zone like angels of death. While we waited for the enemy to come, Chihiro and I found one another. We laid on the floor, side by side, and pointed our weapon barrels through a gap in the wall, keeping watch over the northeast corner of the parking lot. Tsubaki was nearby, resting her own rifle on a countertop. Chihiro tapped my boot with hers to get my attention. "Hey, Blake," she whispered. "I was thinking, where are we going to live after the war?" "Huh?" I asked. "We've both lost our homes," she said. "I can't go back to Tokyo, and I heard someone else won the election in America, so you can't go back to Washington." "Honestly, I haven't thought about that," I confessed, slowly adjusting my grip on my rifle. "I suppose my family will go back to Michigan, but what about you?" Chihiro sighed. "That's just the thing," she said. "There's really nowhere I can go. I've got some money saved up, my military paychecks. I think I can live how do you say it in English? I've got enough money to live in a kaposuru oteru for maybe a year, but then I'll be homeless." Chihiro leaned her head close to mine and whispered, "Blake, can I live with you after the war? I promise I'll earn my keep. I can cook and clean, and my English is pretty good now. I opened my mouth to answer. Truthfully, I would have brought Chihiro to Detroit in a heartbeat, but a third voice spoke up behind us. I can help. Looking behind us, we saw that Tsubaki had been listening to our conversation. She waved at us from the counter where her rifle was perched. Tsubaki whispered to us, My parents have a restaurant in Nagasaki, and our family owns the apartment above it. I'll bet my mom and dad would love to set you up in a room, especially after what I told them about you. Wait, Endo-chan, Chihiro whispered back. You told your parents about me? What did you say? Oh, nothing much, Tsubaki replied in a sing-song tone. Just how you saved me from a horde of Russians, and how you're perfect in every way, and you're like super pretty and... Oh, dear God, I mumbled. Watch out, She's going to ask if she can have your babies next. Tsubaki's eyes went wide as though I'd put an idea in her mind and she decided to run with it. She started to say something about a three-way marriage between herself, Chihiro, and me, but thankfully a voice sounded from the roof, cutting her off. Movement! Nanako Yamada shouted. I see Russians! Chihiro, Tsubaki, and I stopped talking and looked down the sights of our weapons. About 200 yards away, on the far side of No Man's Land, a Soviet army truck came to a stop, a white flag hanging from a passenger side window. Two people wearing red army uniforms disembarked. One of them was carrying a megaphone. From somewhere to our left, I heard Kotori gasp, Son of a bitch! That's Yutaka and Yukiko! I almost didn't recognize them in their red army uniforms. Yutaka Yamamoto passed his rifle to Yukiko and then raised his megaphone to address our group. Soldiers of the 13th Artillery! Yutaka's amplified voice echoed. I was with you not that long ago. I know you're tired, hungry, and worn out. I know you're struggling and that some of you are going through great hardships. I call out to you as a friend and comrade. Come over to us. The People's Republic is humane. We have food and warm clothes. You will not be made to lay down your lives for a government that has abandoned and shunned you. My friends, you have nothing to fear from us. Please come out with your hands above your head. From her hiding place behind a checkout counter, Kotori rose up and took aim with her assault rifle. You sold me and my friends to rapists and murderers, Kotori shrieked. You're a liar and a traitor, and I'll kill you! The sound of Kotori's rifle echoed through the supermarket, and the glass window shattered. Yamamoto had less than a quarter of a second to react before the first bullets struck the hood of the truck behind him. Yamamoto and Takahashi both jumped with fright and then dove for cover as the rest of our squad opened fire on them. Chihiro and I laid on the trigger so hard that the barrels of our guns were hot to the touch. Then the enemy replied. We were so focused on the two traitors that nobody noticed Soviet forces moving to entrench themselves on the far side of No Man's Land. Whatever buildings still stood were being turned into strong points. As Yukiko and Yutaka retreated to the safety of their own lines, I heard the shrill blast of a whistle. They're coming, I yelled. They're going to attack! I heard 7 or 8 small cracks in short succession as smoke bombs were thrown into the open space between the two sides. Quickly, opaque gray smoke started to fill the No Man's Land, hiding the far side from view. Jesus Christ, Hal shouted. It looks like they've got a whole company of infantry over there. We're going to be overwhelmed. We have to fall back. Negative, Holly cried out from her makeshift command post in the manager's office. We've got to stall them here as long as we can. The guns haven't been set up in their new positions yet. The No Man's Land was now completely obscured with smoke. For all we knew, there were 100 Russians creeping up on us in silence. The hissing of the smoke grenades was starting to die away. I knew that the fight could start at any moment. I was so tense that my senses seemed to have gone into hyperactive mode. I could feel Chihiro's breathing, hear the smallest crunch of boots on debris, and knew, just a few seconds in advance, that the wind was about to kick up. Now, throughout the entire day, Weather stations in the area recorded the conditions in Hiroshima as calm and cold. The sudden blast of high wind in Minami Ward was later dismissed as an instrumentation error. But we know that Akira Robinson was on the roof of that supermarket, and that she was actively helping my squad defend it. It's not out of the realm of possibility that Akira somehow caused that freak blast of wind, especially when it worked to our benefit. A sudden gust of wind swept through the battlefield, blowing away the enemy smokescreen to reveal... "Enemy infantry!" Tsubaki called out. "Dead ahead!" "Mow 'em down!" Soylent shouted. Nearly 200 Soviet soldiers were suddenly caught out in the open, halfway through the wide-open space that separated their line from ours. All 9 of us opened fire, sending hundreds, then thousands of bullets downrange. Several dozen enemy soldiers crumpled on the spot. Others dove onto the ground, seeking out whatever cover they could find. A few brave souls stood their ground and raised their weapons to return fire. Chihiro and I stayed low in the prone position, firing our rifles through the same hole in the wall. We each called out targets for the other to shoot at, and when one of us missed, the other was there to pick up the kill. Meanwhile, above us, Tsubaki's assault rifle spat out hot shells every time she fired a round. Spent brass rained down on Chihiro and I from above, an unconventional reminder that our young friend was still fighting. Elsewhere, Kotori and Soylent were darting from one window to the next, firing only a few rounds before relocating to another shooting position. Kotori seemed to have just lost herself in the violence. "That's for Tachibana!" she shouted as she gunned down a Russian man. "And here's one for Iwasaki! And this one's from all of Sapporo!" She threw a hand grenade with such strength that it shattered the storefront window before landing on the ground about 70 feet away. The detonation sent several Soviet fighters tumbling into the dirt and rubble. High up on the roof, Hal and Nanako could only squeeze off a few shots before the enemy figured out their location. Bullets sailed over their heads, forcing Hal to put his hand on Nanako's head and force her to get down. "It's getting too hot up here," Hal told her. "Time to get downstairs." Nanako pointed towards a roof access door that led back into the main building. "You go first, I'll follow," she said. While Hal made a dash for the door, Nanako went back to the roof edge. I got the story of what happened next from Yukiko. Nanako stood upright on the rooftop, seemingly oblivious to the many bullets being sent her way by Russian sharpshooters. She dropped her rifle and raised both of her hands to chest height. Nanako made a fist with her right hand and struck her own left palm with it. Yukiko described the sensation of a cold and harsh wind sweeping across the battlefield for a moment before several explosions ripped across the area. Once again, it seems Nanako caused a number of hand grenades to prematurely detonate in the pockets of Russians who carried them. This same wave that triggered explosions hit Yukiko and caused her to fall onto the ground, clutching her head in agony. Nanako had, perhaps intentionally or not, exposed Yukiko to psionic energy. Sometimes, this exposure is sufficient enough to awaken a dormant gift. Decades later, after the Second Hyperspace War, Yukiko told me that as soon as the wave of psionic energy hit her, she was overwhelmed by a noise unlike anything she'd ever heard before. It was as though explosions were taking place inside her brain. Yukiko screamed and curled up into a ball as the chaotic scene developed around her. Back inside the supermarket, Holly set up her M249 light machine gun in a window of the manager's office and locked down one whole half of the parking lot by herself. Meanwhile, the rain of shell casings on my back suddenly stopped. "Hey, fangirl," I called up to Tsubaki. "Everything all right up there?" "My gun's not working," Tsubaki cried. "I think it's broken." Reacting mostly on instinct, I rolled over onto my back, leaving Chihiro to cover the enemy on her own. I got up to see Tsubaki struggling with her assault rifle. "Get down!" I shouted, and grabbed Tsubaki's ankle, pulling her out of the line of fire. As soon as she hit the floor, I got a good look at Tsubaki's weapon. It was a double feed, a kind of malfunction where two live bullets get stuck in the firing chamber together. Modern laser and plasma weapons don't suffer this kind of problem, but it does still occasionally happen to Gauss rifles. I grabbed Tsubaki's weapon and gave her mine. "Cover me while I clear this," I ordered. Tsubaki took up a shooting position by the window while I cleared the weapon jam. Sending bullets to the floor, I reloaded Tsubaki's rifle with rounds from one of my own spare magazines. Then looked up just in time to see movement. A Russian had somehow managed to reach the doors and was forcing his way into the supermarket. He was aiming a pistol at Chihiro's back. I threw myself over top of Chihiro, covering her body with my own and aiming at the intruder's chest. "Back off!" I shouted, punctuating each word with a gunshot. "Back! Get back! Back up!" I shot the enemy soldier at least 6 times. He stumbled and fell over backwards as Chihiro scrambled to her feet. "They're inside!" Tsubaki yelled. "They're inside the building!" And then they were on us. With one last smashing of glass, Soviet paratroopers, outfitted in reddish-brown camouflage, were inside the supermarket. "Everyone on your feet!" I shouted. "Don't let them through!" I dashed around a countertop and swung Tsubaki's rifle like a baseball bat, striking a Russian as he tried to clamber through the window toward us. I hit him directly in the helmet, and the stock of Tsubaki's rifle snapped like a tree branch. "Everyone fall back!" Holly cried out. "Find new cover!" Holly left her machine gun behind and started running through the store aisles, throwing hand grenades down any lane where she saw a Russian. Blood and canned goods flew into the air as she blew apart several enemies this way. Meanwhile, Hal and Nanako intercepted 2 Russians in the frozen goods aisle. Both of our squadmates were caught off guard and grabbed, but the enemy quickly found out that one does not simply grab the paradox and hold her. We're not sure if Akira used brute strength or psionics to get away from her captor, or perhaps a combination of the two. All we know for certain is that Hal lost track of Nanako for a few seconds, and when he found her again, she was standing over a dead Russian, covered from head to foot in the other guy's blood. The enemy was killed with his own bayonet, and Nanako looked, in Hal's words, positively psychotic. Meanwhile, Kotori, Aaron, and Soylent were fighting shoulder to shoulder, pressing 2 enemy soldiers back out the door they'd come in through. Soylent fired a pistol through the door, while Kotori used a knife to stop the enemy soldier holding the door open with his arm. "Smith!" Aaron yelled. "We can't hold this position anymore! We've got to retreat!" The situation was untenable everywhere. 9 people just can't hold out against a whole company of men. We were losing ground every second, and in hindsight, it's a miracle none of us were killed. Holly's retreat order came just in time as we were about to be overrun. "Break contact!" she yelled. "Disengage and fall back! Everyone get outside!" We broke contact and abandoned the supermarket. Directly behind the building was a row of houses, all crammed together in a tight way. 4 of these structures had been blown to bits by Soviet artillery, giving us a direct line of sight on what looked like a huge stone wall cutting right through the middle of the urban landscape. "That's the train tracks!" Kotori called out. She was right. Elevated on a 5-meter-high platform, the Shin Hakushima train station was just a few hundred yards to our right. There was a tunnel nearby that went directly underneath the train tracks and led to the rest of Minami Ward. "Through there!" Holly ordered. We dashed underneath the railroad trestle and took shelter behind the side of an organic food store. As we readied ourselves for a fight, I heard a voice talking from the other side of the stone wall. "Everyone quiet!" I gasped. "Listen, what are they saying?" We could hear Yutaka Yamamoto's voice on the other side of the wall. He was speaking Japanese. After a moment, we heard a truck pulling up to the spot where we heard his voice. Yutaka said something else, then clambered inside the truck, and it drove away. Kotori Sato said something in Japanese that I dare not repeat here, lest my wife put soap in my mouth. Kotori, Chihiro, and Tsubaki all stood up, readying their weapons as though they were about to get into another fight. The 3 Japanese speakers were cursing to one another angrily. The other members of our squad, who could not speak Japanese, looked alarmed and frightened. "Wait a bloody minute," Soylent said. "What the hell just happened?" "Didn't you hear him?" Chihiro said, incredulously. "We heard him," I said. "Understanding is a different story." "That traitorous weasel said he knows where our cannons are. Kotori spat in anger. He said he's going to get the Russian artillery to wipe out the rest of our big guns. Are you kidding me? Holly gasped. How'd they find us out? The simple answer to Holly's question is aerial recon. While our squad was busy defending the perimeter, a Soviet helicopter flew through the air, and its pilot noticed the courtyard of Hiroshima Castle was suddenly empty. The enemy helo then did a lap around the entire city, searching for the 10 howitzers of the 13th Artillery. By the time we broke contact and fell back, the enemy knew we had relocated our howitzers to a new position. Kotori put one hand to her ear and listened to the far side of the railroad trestle. We could hear the sounds of at least 2 trucks and possibly even a T-90 battle tank, all driving away from the scene. They're heading east, she said. Probably going to cross the Kyobashi River and head for Russian lines. I looked back at Kotori and my eyes went wide. An idea was quickly forming in my mind. Captain Smith, is your radio still on the same frequency as this morning? Holly instinctively reached for the high-frequency radio on her belt. Ta, Robinson, I never changed it. I pointed to Kotori and Chihiro. Here's the plan, I said. We're going to track Yutaka and try to figure out where the Soviet artillery is. Keep your radio close. If we see anything worth shooting, you call it in, and you need to get the 13th to drop as many shells as possible, okay? Aaron stepped forward. I'm going with you, he said. Kotori gave him a smile. Tsubaki tried to join us as well, but Holly caught her by the arm and said, No way, lassie. Robinson, Rei, Sato, Tachibana will listen for you. Kotori, Chihiro, Aaron, and I parted ways with our friends and started to run along the side of the railroad trestle, following the sounds of vehicles back into enemy territory. Making sure to keep the train trestle between ourselves and the enemy, we bounded from one stretch of cover to the next, making sure to keep ourselves out of sight. We followed the enemy for about 5 minutes before the noise of engines was replaced by a deep, gurgling sound. I knew it, Kotori panted. They're crossing the river. We rounded a street corner and found ourselves in a small public park on the shores of the Kyobashi River, one of the many branches of the Ota River Delta. The dense trees in the park shielded us from view, and the 4 of us decided to go for the stealthy approach. Crawling on our hands and knees, we made our way across the park and arrived on the riverbank. We saw 2 amphibious fighting vehicles moving across the water. One of them popped defensive smoke to screen its movement from our view. There he goes, Aaron hissed. We've got to get over there. Then I'm going to wring that treacherous snake's neck and watch him die, Kotori breathed. Not if I get him first, Sato, Chihiro whispered. Hey, ladies, Aaron said. How are we going to catch Yamamoto when he's about to be on the far side of the river? I looked up and down the riverbank and spotted our opportunity. Guys, I said, look, the Toikawa Bridge is still standing. Yeah, Kotori said, looking south at the mighty structure of concrete I was pointing at. That's because I told Harper to put landmines on it. Do you know where those mines are? I looked at Kotori. She nodded, then her face went white. Chihiro, meanwhile, looked as though she'd read my mind and understood what I was thinking about. That's great, Chihiro said, without waiting for anyone else to speak. Let's go. December 15th, 2012, minutes after midnight. This is a bad idea, Kotori whispered. This is a really bad idea. You're gonna get us killed. Can't think of anything better, Sato, Aaron hissed. No? Then Robinson's plan it is. The 4 of us were hiding on the ground floor of the shattered remains of the Myangyoshi Buddhist temple, about a stone's throw away from the river. We were lying in ambush. Once already, we'd seen a Soviet truck trundle down this street. According to Aaron, it looked like the kind of Ural truck used to resupply soldiers in the field. He'll come back this way soon, on his way to base. So, we waited, and within an hour, our patience was rewarded. The 2.5-ton truck came thundering down the street again. Looking up from the rubble, I saw there was only a driver, and that the rear cargo bed was uncovered. "He's alone," I whispered. "On my go. 1, 2, 3, go!" We rose up and took aim with our weapons. Chihiro, however, jumped right into the middle of the street and pointed a pistol directly into the truck driver's face. "Get out now!" Chihiro shouted at the driver. "You don't want to die for an empty truck!" The driver, a Red Army soldier, stopped his vehicle and stepped out, hands above his head. I distinctly remember that this man was definitely not a Russian. He looked vaguely Central Asian, possibly from Azerbaijan or Armenia. "I don't want to die at all," the Soviet soldier said. "I'm just a conscript. I've got no quarrel with you people." "Leave your weapon, helmet, and radio in the truck," I said, keeping my rifle trained on him. "Oh, and leave your coat, too. Then turn around and don't stop walking until you find the ocean." The Soviet trooper complied, leaving his truck in our possession. I grabbed the Red Army jacket he left behind and turned to the girls. "Sato, you're bigger," I said. "Put this on, then get in the driver's seat." "This is insane," Kotori mumbled. "You'll be fine," Aaron said. He put a reassuring hand on Kotori's shoulder. "Just like Robinson said, you'll drive and look like a Russian boy, and I'll do the talking for you if that's what's needed." Chihiro and I grabbed the canvas covering from inside the cab and tossed it over the top of the truck bed, allowing the two of us to hide from view. Chihiro took my gun and hid beneath the canvas. I grabbed the driver's radio and tuned it to the 13th Artillery's frequency before joining Chihiro in the back. Kotori put on the Red Army jacket and donned a Soviet helmet before getting in the driver's seat while Aaron got into the passenger seat. He tilted his helmet down to hide his face from view. Finally, Aaron pulled the American flag off his uniform. Before she put the truck in drive, Kotori turned around and shouted to me in the back, "Robinson, where'd you come up with this crazy plan?" "Greek mythology," I replied. "We're screwed," Kotori breathed. "We're gonna die."